In this video, I'm going to explain how to make these Boolean cuts in video format. I know I explained it a little bit before using Boolean splits and planes. It's quite simple. You just trace the lines that you want. You probably want to grab as many shapes as you can, extrude some. In this case, I don't really have everything extruded because I'm being very, very quick about this. As you can see, this is extruded quite a bit, and that's because I know I'm going to cut it down. So if I type the command plane, I'm just going to go ahead and drag a large plane just like this. I'm going to move it up using my gumball. And I'm going to use this rotational gizmo, right? Rotational gizmo. And that's one direction. Okay, that's cool, but not that cool. So if you come back here, I know it's going to take a little bit of time to understand the 3D space. Grabbing this green gizmo, I'm going to rotate it like that. So it's 2 degrees of rotation, at least more than 1 degree of rotation. I'm going to move it down. I'm seeing I'm cutting through a lot of things. So I'm going to move it down a little bit more, make sure I'm cutting through everything. That looks about right. That corner is not fully cut, so I'm going to drop it a little bit more. And there we go. Okay, that's why we extrude really, really tall, because if you didn't, then your thing's going to be like almost over here. It's going to be almost nothing, okay? And we can do things to account for that, but for now, let's not worry about it. Okay, so I'm going to left drag everything. When I do that, you can see that plane's not selected. If I right drag, everything is selected. Okay, I can always control click the plane and it's gone, but it's just easier to just go left drag everything. As long as this plane is not captured, like part of it is outside the window, you're good. Okay, so now once everything is selected, you could type the command Boolean split. Now it knows that you selected the objects you want cut. So the next thing it's going to ask you is the cutting object. So I'm going to select this, click that, boom. I can go ahead and left drag once again and select only the things on top. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is just create a layer called cut objects. Okay, and that's going to be easier because now you could just move this to cut objects and you could just hide it. You can also just, let's see, select objects and I can move them slightly. And we're going to be able to do stuff with this a little bit later. So don't worry about it because you can always like start shifting things, right? Maybe that's a bit too much shift, maybe shift slightly down. And so you could do some things. That's what's happening over here. I just shifted the cut object. Now, maybe the top stuff you can't use as much. So I'm just going to go ahead and hide these. Well, I'm just going to delete this plane because I don't need it. And you can see that you get a nice cut plane. Now, sometimes it's nice to use another plane. Let's just type plane and then cut in a different direction, still on the top. Now this is upper cut. We're going to do bottom cuts, which is something like that in a second. So now I can come back here and I can rotate this direction. Maybe I want to truncate this corner, right? Again, maybe try 2 degrees of rotation just because it's a little bit more interesting. Okay, and then I'm just going to select this and this object, Boolean split, select the plane to cut, and you could delete that and delete these. Okay, or you could, sorry, I shouldn't delete these. I'm just going to move them here. Boom. Okay, so now you get this kind of weird gem shape rock-like thing. Okay, now time for the undercuts. Now I'd highly suggest every time you make some cuts just to copy the entire thing over and move this way. Okay, I'm going to create a plane once again right here. Okay, now I'm going to move this up. You don't need to like cut through everything uniformly. So right here in the undercut, especially undercuts, you don't need to like cut the whole thing. Otherwise it would just fall out. Like for example, if I did all that, maybe a bit too much. I mean, I guess I can get away with it, but I'm just going to do something like this because I want this corner chopped off like that. Okay, so I'm going to click these 2 objects. Okay, Boolean split. Cutting object is selected, and then we can go ahead and unselect those. Now I'm going to create another layer called cut objects bottom. That way these are separate from the top because I'm probably going to use these ones and not the other ones. Okay, so I'm going to keep these on and we'll talk about that in a second. And if I select these, select objects, I can go ahead and move these to create space and gap, right? All right, so I'm just going to do that. Right, kind of interesting. So then what else are we going to do? So we want to create another plane. Okay, right here. That's a pretty big plane right here. And then we're going to undercut yet again, maybe in a different direction, like the rotation gizmo. Rotate again multiple degrees. And you should just test this stuff out. Like I have my own sensibility, so I kind of know what I'm doing for my taste, but you're going to have to just do what makes sense for your project and what kind of techniques and strategies you're working through with your patterns. Okay, so this looks like a maybe a good enough undercut. It's gonna go through the top as well. Just kind of note that. That's probably too much of a cut. Okay, so if I go Boolean split, cut that, unselect this, you'll notice if I delete that, it's a little bit too much. Okay, it's a little bit too much of a cut. You'll see it's like standing on nothing, right? So you don't want to do things like that. You just want to be aware of what you're doing. So this is a bit too much, so I'm going to rotate it back down this way. I'll move this like that, and I'm just going to Boolean cut these guys. Okay, so Boolean split. Okay, and then we'll move this to that. Okay, delete this, and then we can go ahead and I'm just going to delete them. Okay, because I don't want them. So you can see you're getting a pretty figural shape out of this. You know, what's useful is to start moving these just slightly, start getting some seam lines, some reveals. Okay, so just kind of be aware that you want to get a little bit of reveals and seams. Kind of move these a little bit. Okay, so if we go to Arctic mode, again, don't go to artistic, Arctic. Artistic might crash your computer. Okay, so you're starting to get a little bit more figural qualities to this thing. Okay, so I'm saying that I can probably move this, get a bigger seam line. Yeah, like that. Looks a bit better. Now, another thing you could do is you can go back to your tracing lines. So you see that there's a little bit more figuration here. And this is like a really, really deep cut. Like that's a lot, you know? So if you get something like this, or even if you don't have something extreme, you just want to make the shape a little bit more interesting, go ahead and draw some more figures in here. And I know I drew something in here. Where is it? Right here. Okay, so I drew another, shape. You can see there's no planes here. And say I'm just going to extrude this up. Okay, I'm going to extrude it beyond. You see, I'm going to extrude it beyond the kind of Boolean surface over here. Okay, and I'm just going to cap that. All right, and so let's look at this in Arctic mode. Again, go to Arctic. Do not go to artistic, and you'll see you get this nice, interesting intersection of shapes. Again, gives it a bit more figuration. It breaks up the stupid plane cut, because the plane cuts can get a bit too annoying. You know, it's a bit too much. So you want to break it up a little bit. So again, go back to your traced items. When you look underneath this, there's a lot of things going down here. And remember, sometimes you have double lines, you have hatches. What do those mean, right? Maybe the hatch is extrusion that goes beyond the plane cut, like this Boolean split oblique cut. And another thing you could do is I can go ahead and grab just this surface. So let me go to shaded mode so you can see this. I'm grabbing just this face by clicking Control-Shift-Click, left click. And I'm just going to move this slightly. Okay. Actually, I don't want to do that. I want to go ahead and don't use the arrow. Use this little circle. That's going to create another extension of a face. You can see that just came out kind of like as a rectangle attached. If I was to go back to do this with the arrow, it's just going to move it. It's just going to stretch it. I don't want that. I want to just go ahead and use this little red circle, and I'm just going to extrude it out. Okay. And so when we go back to Arctic mode, you can see that gave me a nice vertical line now, right? Sometimes it's nice when it's just flat. Like I actually do like that probably more than the vertical line, but sometimes you do want to have these vertical lines, meaning these vertical lines that come out. So one way you could do that is by pushing the surfaces out. Okay, just don't get too carried away. So if I click this, actually, you can click the surface on this, and I'm just going to go ahead and move this forward. So you can get a little extension just like that. So now you have this line at the edge. So again, what I did was I just selected the surface. Again, I'll just show you in shaded mode. Select the surface and then click the circle and move it. Now, we can get really, really messy now, which is going to be, it's not going to be our friend when we want to make physical models and start drawing. So just be careful. Don't have too many intersecting lines. Like I can resolve this by using something called Boolean union, and that makes this one solid shape now. I wouldn't be quick to just Boolean union everything together, because once you Boolean union, you can't go back. So just don't do that until you absolutely need to. Okay, so that's kind of like the basis of what I want you to do. Again, I'm going to draw maybe a few more shapes down here. Again, you just have to get used to working in 3D. And as you start doing this, you want to think about how a person might occupy this. You have one person you want to occupy this thing. I'm going to extrude this upwards. Let's see. Let's just do this. Cap. Okay, that looks kind of stupid. I'm not going to lie. I don't really like that. But you can always come and Boolean split this thing again. So I'm going to go ahead and, create a plane. and then I'm a Boolean split. I don't like where it's located. It's kind of located in that opening, which I thought was kind of nice. But if it looks kind of silly, like this does, kind of just looks like a chimney, you come back here, maybe change the angle. I don't actually know if changing the angle is a good idea. Let's just show you what it looks like. So Boolean split. Okay, I'm just gonna delete that for now. Yeah, I mean, let's go to Arctic mode. Yeah, I mean, it just looks funny. I would say this is the point of iterating. You know, you might just do something and say it looks stupid. So, you know, you got to go back and just test things out. Moments where you have like a heavy, you know, oblique surface like this, it's probably a good opportunity to extrude something up. So I'm going to move these two things slightly that way. So I could see that this geometry right here, this is the geometry I'm going to want to use. So I'm going to just go ahead and draw over this. I'm going to go ahead and draw something like this. Sorry if you can't really see it, but something like that. Again, using my tracings, and I'm just going to extrude this upwards. Okay, so I'm going to extrude this probably to that point. Okay, and now I'm going to cap this. Okay, and that's probably decent enough. You know, now we're getting a vertical read that's breaking the oblique cut. And you know, I'm just saying a bunch of gibberish right now probably to you, but we're trying to learn how to make geometry and, you know, figuration. And sometimes these kind of very strong triangle or sharp, triangle lines, they're kind of bothersome. And you're going to want to do something to deal with it, because as just a pure volume, it looks ridiculous. But maybe if we had frames reinforcing this, it wouldn't be too bad. Or maybe just a plane. So, you know, one thing you could do is, I'm going to just draw circle frames because I'm just being lazy, but you should probably draw something that probably makes sense to you. But if you draw a circle like that and extrude it up, okay. And I'm going to do this again. I'm just going to copy this point right here. I'm going to move it there. I'm going to move one there. Move another one there. Again, I'm being really lazy. These should probably be, and I can't see them at all. These should probably be moved to their center. Obviously, had a square, you'd have to use something else. I'm going to move these to their proper location. They might not hit the corner properly. Okay, so extrude this. Oops, extrude. Let's just take this all the way up. Okay, and when you do something like this, you're extruding a circle, you're going to want to just cap it. Okay, and let's go back to Arctic mode because that's how we check the shadows. And that's a little bit better, right? It kind of helps. I mean, this still looks kind of funky, in my opinion. It just kind of looks goofy. And we'd have to resolve these little intersections. But right now, what I want you to do is just think about how you use a frame in combination with a volume, right? And now it doesn't need to just be a straight up column, right? But that's what you do, you know, as a starter. And what the frame is helping me do is it's reinforcing this line that I cut out from the Boolean split. One last thing I want to mention is there's eventually a technique that you'll be able to get some surface articulation, some depth on the surface like this, to break the kind of, you know, boring, plain, oblique cut that this is. Now, we did extrude that to help break that reading, but, you know, adding a little bit more surface articulation is going to help. You know, anything like this, it starts to give slight depth, some, you know, what we were calling 2.5D on a volume. Like this is full 3D, the volume. This kind of slight extrusion is what I like to call surface articulation. That's just going to help the reading. It doesn't give us any additional spatial qualities of inhabitants, but it does give us some more interesting qualities on the form and the geometry itself. Okay. One other thing to note is there might be outside factors. Okay. Let's just say you have some pattern that you made, maybe some hatch pattern inside the objects that, you know, it's like a zigzag line. Say you had a offset of these zigzag lines. I don't know. Okay. Well, that didn't really work the way I wanted it to. Let's just say you had some zigzag lines, right? Just, you know, you had a pattern of zigzag lines. That's your hatch inside, you know, one of your shapes. Let's say you had a shape that looked like this, right? And that was your hatch, right? Think about the hatch pattern in a way to help you three-dimensionally. And what I mean by that is, like, say I grab this, right? Say I grab this right here. And you got to make sure that it's a closed geometry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close the geometry just like that. Okay. So these aren't joined. It's two separate lines. I'm just going to type the command join, or you just type J. And so now they're closed, and you can see it says one closed curve. Okay. So what you could do right now is I'm going to move this to this edge. Now, for the purpose of, just exploration, the hatch pattern is going to be on the inside of your shapes. This, what I'm doing right now, is on the outside. But just kind of note what I'm doing is I'm going to cap this. Right, you can add some surface articulation using a hatch pattern or an inspiration from a hatch pattern. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mirror this inwards. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to mirror it inwards. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, click this object. Actually, sorry, let me go ahead and do this. This example is not a good one. I kind of split this object too much. Come back to the original one we were looking at. And so if I go ahead and Boolean split this, actually, I'm going to use a command. Yeah, I'm going to use Boolean split. That's probably the best. There's other Boolean commands, but they could be a little bit tricky. I'm going to select these two right here. These are the two volumes. So Boolean split. Find the object I just made right here and Boolean split it. So now if I grab, where's the original object? This is the original object right here. It wasn't deleted. But then you'll notice that it Boolean split two things out of it. Right? So now you get this interesting pattern, some surface articulation that happens on the inside surface. Now I didn't go all the way up. I probably should have. It probably makes more sense to do that. So I'm just going to undo all this, undo that, and I'm going to select that shape, right? And I'm just going to actually make it go way beyond the surface. Now, if it comes up above like that, that's actually kind of interesting too. So that's one way of dealing with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these two objects. I'm going to use a command called Boolean difference. And what that's going to do is it's going to select the objects you want to be cut. And it's going to select the objects that you want to use as the cutting tool, which is this profile shape. But instead of splitting, it's just going to delete the cutting object and remove it from the objects you want to be cut. So I'm going to click enter, and there we go. That's an easy way of doing it. So now you get some surface articulation on the exterior, right? Now I clicked the zigzag as a hatch pattern. Maybe for starters, you try that. Maybe there's some other pattern that you want to try, but go ahead and be creative with this. It doesn't have to be as simple-minded as you think, because just the straight extrusions are kind of boring. But as soon as we start getting it a little bit more character, this starts looking a little bit more interesting. Again, the thing you want to think about as well that I'm not really concentrating too much here is how does a person actually occupy this space, right? How does entry work? This clearly looks like there's entry points, right? And maybe the frames help direct direction. It reinforces the grid. So think about things like that. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Hopefully that was helpful for you. Maybe it's a bit too long. If you have any questions, do let me know.